and welcome back to the Coach Read. I'm Jonathan, your occupational therapy professional.
Hey, and I'm Magnolia, your speech therapy professional today. As always.
I know. As has been the case.
Like it's a surprise.
It's us. We're here. We have returned. And today it's kind of the trend that we've been on, this whole school-centered idea.
Mm-hmm. We're shifting focus a little bit more to back to therapy world, a little bit stronger.
Yeah, for today.
We've kind of talked the fringe of therapy.
Yeah, for sure. For today, this is definitely a hardcore therapy topic, but it is relevant to school. And I will explain how. So today we're going to talk about a curriculum called the Zones of Regulation. It is very well known within the world of occupational therapy, and I would imagine it is becoming more and more popular in the world of just pediatric therapy in general.
Yeah.
But what we're gonna talk about is what it is, what do we do with it, what's it for, and how is it relevant?
Yay.
And the reason that I say it's relevant to school is because the Zones of Regulation, well, let me give some back. Let me just give a brief little rundown of what it is, a brief little intro, and then dive into kind of a little bit of the history of it. So the Zones of Regulation is a curriculum that aims to teach kids. It can totally be used for not just kids, but teach kids. It was designed for children to understand how they're feeling, express how they're feeling, and develop strategies to help control their bodies and responses to how they're feeling. And the reason that it was created by an occupational therapist named Leah Kuypers. She's super cool. I don't know her personally. I wish I did, but she is the one who, when I went through and did a training course, it was a 2-day training, and she was actually the one that led the training, which I thought was really cool. Unfortunately, at the time, and maybe it's different now, but at the time it was not eligible for continuing education credits or professional development credits.
Okay.
Which was sad, but it was still super worth, all of the time and investment that I put into it. Because, okay, so Leah created this curriculum. She is a school-based OT, and her history has been in school-based intervention and practice. So her focus as a school-based OT is really helping kiddos to be as successful as they can be in their academic occupations, specifically in that education portion of the OT, the OT scope of practice. And what she found in her practice over many, many years, she found that a lot of her kids were being excluded from the classroom because of challenging behavior. And so what that means is classroom exclusions can look like a lot of things. Maybe it's their, just being sent out to sit in the hallway for a minute. Maybe it's them being sent to the principal's office. Maybe it's them being sent to in-school suspension or after-school detention, or maybe it's them being expelled or suspended from school altogether. And she saw this a lot. And this data, the research data, is very clear that there is a high correlation with the more times that you as a student are excluded from the classroom, the more at risk you are of a lot of really negative long-term outcomes. So you're at more risk for delinquency, like delinquent behaviors. So you're at more risk of engaging in harmful behavior like smoking, drinking, even things as far as petty theft, getting involved with crime, doing, even violent crime. You're also at a much higher risk of like dropping out of school early, not finishing and getting your
Diploma.
high school diploma, which due to that limits your access to a lot of job opportunities and a lot of resources post high school.
Mm-hmm.
And so due to that, it's also highly correlated to increased rates of poverty, increased rates of oh gosh, what's the other thing? Homelessness
Mm-hmm.
or home displacedness.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know what the correct term is. And then even there is correlation with early death.
Okay.
So the more times that you as a student are excluded from the classroom, it has a correlation. It doesn't mean that this is going to happen. It's
right.
causative relationship, as we talk about in scientific literature,
Mm-hmm.
which just means that no one can say if you're excluded from the classroom 10 times, then you're
Mm-hmm.
going to die earlier than if you weren't.
Right.
That's not what that means, but it just means that you are at higher risk.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that makes sense is because you are potentially in a position to engage in a lot more of these dangerous activities.
Mm-hmm.
And also your just education level is lower, which that causes, if you drop out of school early, then your education level is lower. And so that leads to a lot of other health outcomes just because it's like lower health literacy,
Mm-hmm.
meaning they just aren't as aware of health issues. And so maybe they aren't going to the doctor as frequently as they need to. Maybe they maybe they aren't able to get a job that is supportive of them and their family that offers insurance. And so they don't have access. So she was seeing all this, and like the literature is clear that this is a problem. And like having kiddos leaving the classroom for long extended periods of time and missing out on instructional time and time with their peers
Mm-hmm.
has a really a really strong relationship with all of these really negative
Mm-hmm.
outcomes
Yeah.
as they get older.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was like, how do I fix this? Like, what do I do? And what she found in her experience, and let me just preface all of this, right? All of this is my remembrance
Mm-hmm.
from the training that I did with her.
Right.
Okay. So I'm not trying to speak on her behalf, but this
Right.
is just what I learned through her training.
Mm-hmm.
And if I get it incorrect, please let me know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I am very open to correction and I want to know if I'm misspeaking.
Yeah.
But what she encountered in the schools was a lot of these kids being excluded from the classroom due to these trouble, quote unquote, behaviors, and these things that teachers often struggle with and they struggle to manage, which is fair because some of the things they're hard, like kids having meltdowns, kids being aggressive, kids being violent, kids being destructive. That's hard to deal with. And so she was like, there has been no effective system so far that the school has done to curb this and to help kiddos be successful in this. Because oftentimes the solution is just like send them home, like
Right.
get them out of here. And so she was like, we have to treat the underlying situation. We have to figure out what's going on underneath and develop the skills so that we don't get to this point where we're having these troublesome, these challenging behaviors. And what she felt was the area of need for a lot of these kids was they just were not aware of how they were feeling, how to express that, and then what to do about it once they were having these big emotions.
Yeah.
Or they weren't even recognizing it leading up to having these big emotions. And so she was like, we've got to help teach these kids what it means to be humans who have feelings that are very real and cause us to have very big reactions all the time. And like, how can we be successful while we're having these big feelings?
Right. I would assume like with those kiddos, getting sent home, especially if it's like directly after they've done something, like they, like might cause some like mental health issues for them, even at an early age, whether it's like anxiety of like, if I mess up, I'm going to get sent away, like from the school, they don't get to see their friends. Like, because I like to believe, and like I always tell like people in the clinic is like kids are not inherently mean. Like I feel like that's like something that people kind of have like a misconception about. Like, oh, it's just their personality to be mean.
They do.
Like that's not how it is. So I really like that she like saw that need and was like, how can we help these kids instead of just kind of writing them off?
Yes. Yeah, there's a very big notion in the world of occupational therapy. This especially, I mean, I can speak from that because that's my background and experience, that all behavior is rooted in something.
Right.
Human behavior is the exterior, it's the external expression of something going on underneath. And oftentimes things that bubble up as challenging behavior, whether it's, aggression or outbursts or, physical defiance or whatever it is, it's often rooted in something deeper. It's not just this kid, like you said, it's not just a kid being bad just to be bad.
Right.
And I say bad with like
air quotes all the air quotes here.
I do not believe that. I agree. Children are not just mean to be mean. They're not bad. There's no such thing as a bad kid.
Right.
It's just people struggling. And what's good to remember is that kids, especially, their brains are still developing. They are still in a very active state of neurological development.
Till 25.
Until 25.
Which
until
is crazy.
25. Until 25. A lot of these kids that we work with, their parents aren't 25. They, their parents are still, their brains are still developing.
I like to think that I'm not 25.
We've passed that mark. We have passed that mark.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I don't think people know that your brain still develops.
Yeah,
till 25.
absolutely.
Like that is insane.
And let's talk about it for a second.
Yeah.
Okay. I really want us to do a session one day on kind of more about like brain development.
And I would love to talk about neuroanatomy for a day.
Would love to.
We'll just nerd out for a solid session.
Talk about neuroanatomy. We can totally split these up.
Yeah.
Neuroanatomy for one, like neurodevelopment, and then kind of dive a little bit more into neuroanatomy on a different day. But as a child's brain, as a brain is developing in utero, it develops from the brainstem first, and then moves, and then the midbrain develops, and then it's that outer, the cerebellum, and all of the prefrontal cortex.
I say prefrontal
is the last thing to develop.
Yeah,
and those, as you kind of look at the brain as kind of a cake, that like these layers are developing on top of one another. That last layer is really where our rational thinking comes from. It's where our problem solving, our critical thinking, it's where a lot of our like interpersonal skills come in.
Like decision making.
Yeah.
All kinds of good stuff.
All of that comes at the very end.
Yeah.
At the very end. Because the other things to develop first are important for survival.
Right.
And that last little bit really develops, and it's important for us to thrive as humans, but it's not important necessarily for us to like be breathing, eating, surviving humans. Like you can, I mean, there are people who do not have those portions of their brain who are still alive and able to like eat and breathe and do all the things to sustain life.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily have access to that decision making, that problem solving.
Yeah. The human experience side of
right.
things.
And so it's important for us to remember when dealing with children that these areas of their brain, these like decision making, these rational parts of their brain are not fully formed.
Yeah.
And so we can't expect them to behave in a way
it's very rational
that we would behave as adults.
Right.
Because they can't think through these situations. And so Leah was recognizing all of these things.
Yeah.
Right. Seeing all these things is like, what can I do about it? And how can I help them in these moments when all of these things are happening? So she developed the zones of regulation. And so I feel like we need to talk about, before we talk about what the zones of regulation are, we need to talk about really what regulation is.
Yeah.
Because it's a big hot button topic these days. I hear it all the time. I hear it, it's all over my social media. You have therapy professionals, you have parents, you have doctors, you have teachers, all talking about regulation. Magnolia, do you have a definition of how you How do you describe regulation when you're talking to your families?
It's like hard. That's one of those words that like I feel like I use the word to explain it, and like now I'm realizing like, wow, maybe I don't have a
Use
good
the word in the definition.
yeah, maybe I don't have a good explanation for this. I don't know. I like to kind of call it like that equilibrium state, which I'm just using another big word here. So like I feel like that's not even great either, but neutral or even, all those type words of whether you're talking about like emotional regulation or sensory regulation, whatever it is, like you're trying to get to your kind of neutral zone. Ajax is running around the floor.
You might be hearing Ajax with his zoomies.
He's doing some parkour in here.
He's running on the bed. Isn't he so cute? Can we just take a minute? He's on my bed, like with his little tail up, hyper alert, looking like a little. He's looking at me.
He is not regulated right now. It's a great example.
He is so cute. I can't deal.
So just regulation would be just that.
Over there.
It's because stop talking to your cat.
I'm sorry.
Regulation just kind of coming from any sort of like heightened or lower level back to like a normal neutral even area. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think that's a fair description, and I think that makes sense to a lot of people. The idea of being like, here it comes. I don't know if you heard him, but he attacked his cat tower. So the idea with regulation, the way that I like to describe it, especially when we're talking about regulation for children, and there are multiple factors that all kind of coalesce into this moment, this space of regulation, right? And so ultimately, when we're talking about regulation, and what we will talk about today as regulation is really just being in control over your body and its reaction to the world around it.
Yeah.
And your body's reaction to what's happening inside. That's really it. It's about control. It's about being in control over your body.
Yeah.
That's what we mean. And we'll go a little bit deeper into what that means a little bit. The way that the Zones talks about regulation is really thinking about what are called states of arousal. They're called physiologic states of arousal. And what that means is when we think about us as people and we go through life and we've experienced different things, our bodies have different levels of energy correlated to what's happening. So for instance, right now, me and you, we have pretty neutral levels of energy, right? My body is not in a heightened state. I don't have extra energy. And I'm also not like in this low state of energy where like I'm lethargic and slow moving. I'm at a pretty neutral kind of state.
Yeah.
Okay? But imagine someone who is imagine yourself when you wake up in the morning, moving slowly, you're a little groggy, you're a little like lethargic, and you're just kind of like, you're a little down just because you're tired. That would be a lower physiologic state of arousal. So that's kind of this low energy state, this low arousal state. Then there's us, where we are kind of right now. We're at a pretty steady neutral state. We've got enough energy to do what we got to do. We don't have too much that we're having a hard time doing what we need. So we're kind of at that neutral stage. And then imagine you walk through and you stub your toe, right? Your heart rate increases. You might start breathing a little heavy. You might get a little frustrated, because at least I do. I get frustrated when I feel pain. My response is I tend to respond towards anger, towards frustration and anger. Other people don't, and that's something we can talk about too. But so like I may get a little frustrated because I stubbed my toe, and like my body reacts.
Yeah.
Get a little hot. I may my heart starts beating, like I said. And then imagine somebody, for me, a major trigger of mine is being disrespected. Like, especially an authority figure. I've had experiences with like bosses in the past who were just the worst and would like just walk onto the floor and yell at people and like as if that was a way to motivate them. And for some people that makes them feel really down. It makes me livid. It makes
Mhm.
me angry. So it triggers me into this really heightened state where my heart is beating so hard that I can feel it like pumping in my chest. I have a hard time like staying in control over my breathing. I'm like
Yeah.
breathing heavy. I'm breathing fast. I will start to sweat. Like my body gets hot. These are all different levels of arousal.
Okay.
Does that make sense how we're kind of stair stepping through this process?
Yeah.
And this is stuff that we are familiar with. If we
Mhm.
look at kids, this happen. We can experience these things through our kids too, right?
Mhm.
We see our kids, for instance, let's just do some kid examples.
Okay.
If when our kid is feeling sick, you know, you have a kiddo who maybe they have a fever, maybe they have a cough, maybe they have a runny nose, maybe they have an upset tummy.
Mhm.
They may be slow moving, lethargic. They're just kind of generally unwell.
Yeah.
They are not easily able to get up and do the things that they need to do.
Right. And we typically do see that at therapy sessions.
We
Like
do.
you can tell when a kiddo is sick. They come in, where they typically run in all excited. They kind of just lay there, maybe lean on
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
They just kind of have like a flat
Walk,
expression.
Dragging their feet. Right.
Yeah.
There's maybe lose some color in their
Mhm.
face. So that might be this lower state of arousal.
Right.
Then we have our kids who come in, they are happy to greet you. They say hello. They play, they go pick out a game. They'll sit with you at a table. They'll color their picture, or they'll be able to do like articulation drills. So working on sounds, that's your realm.
Thanks, speech.
That's your realm. But I think of a kid just this week that I was hanging out with during his speech session, and he was super regulated in this neutral energy space because he was doing like high repetitions of these articulation drills.
Mhm.
And that would be this kind of neutral state of arousal. We're just kind of chilling, and then imagine our kids as we go through a higher state of arousal. Maybe our kids that are feeling a little excited, they come in and they're like super pumped to go get a game, and they run up to the games and they're looking around and they're seeing all the different things, and their bodies are moving quickly. Likely their hearts are beating fast. They may be like a little like jumpy, they may be shifting from one foot to another. They may be jumping up and down. They may be like grabbing. And they're like darting from place to place. So they're at this higher state of arousal. Their body has more energy to attack what's happening in this moment. And then we have those, we also are familiar with those other moments when a kiddo may have just been completely overstimulated and we are in full meltdown mode where we are crying uncontrollably. Maybe we're hitting at other people who are trying to comfort them. Maybe we're throwing toys. Maybe we're kicking things. Or maybe we have just had such maybe we're in such an overstimulated state that we are completely then shut down. And these are oftentimes that highest state of arousal. And maybe we've picked up on this kind of this pattern. This is really that highest state of arousal is our body moving into our survival state, our fight or flight state.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people are familiar with from school and from you hear it a lot in like nature documentaries about this fight or flight thing.
Fight or flight or freeze.
Flight or freeze, yeah.
I love to add that one because I resonate with the freeze.
For sure.
I'm not fighting or flighting.
Right.
I'm just gonna freeze.
Yeah, for sure. And so that's really just our body kind of shutting down. What's interesting is these are natural. Like all of this stuff is natural. It's built into our nervous systems and our bodies because it all serves different purposes.
Right.
When we're feeling sick and we're feeling unwell, our body needs to conserve energy to make us to heal and to get better.
Yeah.
When you stub your toe,
you kind of have to go into like the heightened arousal because it's like you might be in danger. Like the body's like, pay attention.
Yeah.
Something could be happening.
Exactly. You're more alert. And then when you're in this like highest state of arousal, you may imagine like human ancestors once upon a time when we are privileged where we live to live in these like homes and we have walls and things that protect us and we don't have to worry about wild animals coming to eat us. But once upon a time, humans did.
Yeah.
We had to worry about and in some places, people still have these really dangerous like environmental stressors that they live in, right?
Right.
And so it's important for them to be able to have access to this fight, flight, or freeze mode.
Mm-hmm.
Freeze maybe is a little. I don't really know how that's super effective. I guess
It's not, but
if like you're getting attacked by a bear, maybe.
true.
I don't know, but like if you're in this moment where you need to like fight something off.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, imagine an intruder breaks into your home. You don't want to go into like low state of arousal.
Right.
You want to be in that like super heightened state because your body is in this reactionary mode where I have to be hyper vigilant and I need to be ready to do what I got to do to keep myself safe in this moment.
Right.
So all of these states of arousal are very important.
And they're very natural.
They are very natural.
It's not like somebody chose to do this.
Right.
Or not to do this.
Exactly. These are natural processes that your body and your nervous system, and not just your nervous system, but also your endocrine system with all your hormones and things, all of these things work in conjunction to move through these states of arousal. And during a day, we may go through multiple.
Right.
And so when we are talking about regulation, we're talking about being in control of our bodies and our actions, no matter what state of arousal we find ourselves in.
Right.
Right. And so that's really what the zones is all about.
Right.
Is kind of categorizing these states of arousal, categorizing the emotions that are commonly found within these states of arousal, identifying triggers. What is it that caused this shift in my state of arousal or caused this emotion to rear its head? And then what do I do to respond to that?
Yeah.
How do I react?
It helps paint a picture for all of those things we've talked about without having to study the science of it and understand the science and the neuroanatomy. You can just have it laid out in front of you.
Exactly.
Or here are the zones.
Right. Like every single parent or teacher or whoever, they don't necessarily have to know all of that other stuff. But it's developed on this understanding of these things. And so the zones is it's a really cool system. So Miss Magnolia.
Yay.
What are
gosh.
What are there are four. What are the
four
zones?
I'm going to tell you the colors first.
Yeah.
Because those come to mind. There's blue.
Okay.
There's yellow, green, and red. Those are the colors.
And so what? Which one is for what?
Blue is for like your lowest state of arousal. So do I need I always just say examples.
Sure.
But tired, kind of talking about like early morning lethargic, or just being like bored, just, not really engaged, things like that.
Sick. Is it
sick. Oh yeah. Sick. We talked about that. The next is green, as far as like next step of arousal level.
If we're kind of thinking about our states of arousal as a staircase.
Yeah. So green, where we're talking about like both of us right now, we're just kind of at like, we're happy, we're just kind of working,
right,
we're neutral zone. We're kind of, just going at it, but not lower or heightened emotions right now.
We've got enough to do what we got to do, but not too much that it becomes.
Right. And then there's yellow, which is just like a little bit heightened. So maybe if you're, I know one of my friends, he used to say like that was like the silly emotion for him. Maybe just being a little bit silly, which we may sometimes do like on this podcast. Like we may like kind of get off track and we're getting a little silly, we get louder, things like that, or like the emotions just get heightened a little bit.
So what are some other examples of yellow zone emotions? Silly.
I said silly.
Silly's my favorite emotion
in that area. Yeah.
Love.
Which also just like hitting their foot, like we were talking about earlier, could be in yellow if you just kind of frustrated. Frustrated is the word I'm looking for there. Kind of being like annoyed would be a good one for that area. And then next state of arousal would be red, following like the steps. And red is like the most heightened level arousal. So that would be like where you're like furiated, like angry.
Yeah.
What else? Or like you're super happy, like elated,
overjoyed.
all these really fun. I just totally lost my hairbow I was playing with. I have to fidget while we do these podcasts, obviously.
I got this new fidget recently and I don't know what I did with it.
That's why Ajax normally attacks my hands while I talk, but it's fine. Anyway, yeah, you're really like extreme emotions, like heightened arousal emotions.
Yes. So we're in that survival state oftentimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Those are all great examples.
And this is a recap from someone who doesn't use it a lot. So
yeah.
Please give me some grace here. I've not had some zones of regulation kids on a case in a while.
Yeah. So we've got, like you said, blue is that lowest state of arousal.
Yeah.
When I describe it to kids, I saw this really cool experiment, which is really fun to do, where you get 4 cups.
Yeah. 4
different cups. And you put a single drop of food coloring of the 4 different colors, blue, green, yellow, and red at the bottom. And then you draw a line around the outside of the cup or the inside of the cup, whichever one works. And you fill the cup to that level. Okay. So imagine in your cup, in your blue zone cup, it has barely anything in it. It is just enough water covering the bottom of the cup because and that is representative of your level of energy, your state of arousal. And when I talk to kids about it, I talk about it as like your energy levels because they understand that.
Yeah.
They're not going to understand a state of arousal. That makes no sense to them. But they understand like, I've got a lot of energy right now. I'm going like super fast. Or I like, no energy. Like
they understand like fast, slow. They love those concepts.
Yes. And so with blue, it's like you have just enough energy to cover the bottom of the cup.
Okay.
So that energy level, those are going to be things like you said, sad, bored, sick, tired, those kinds of low, slow moving emotions.
Yeah.
And then as you go a little bit more, as you have a little bit more energy, you kind of go into this green zone, which is our state of kind of neutrality. It's our kind of, I talk about it as like this state of like, it's where you're even. You've got this even amount of pressure, of energy. And so you would fill your cup halfway.
Yeah.
Your cup is half full with the green zone because you've got enough to do what you got to do, but not too much that it becomes challenging. And so you're about half full. And so those are going to be things like happy, calm, focused, hopeful, grateful, thankful, those kinds of things. One thing you hear oftentimes is ready to learn, in control. A lot of times is what you hear. And then as you go up another one, as you fill your cup to the top, you're in that yellow zone, that yellow state of arousal, which is going to be where you have high energy. I talk about it with the kids as having high energy. And so those are going to be things like silly, like excited, like frustrated or annoyed or scared or nervous or worried or embarrassed.
Yeah.
Where your body has more energy and you oftentimes it's the things where your heart starts beating fast, your breathing comes a little bit more quickly or a little bit more heavily.
You're starting to react a little bit more to things.
You may get hot, you may start sweating, you may be moving around more, be a little bit more jittery, whatever it is, whatever it looks like. Maybe your hands start to clench, maybe you get like fisted hands if you're frustrated or aggravated. And then red zone is that highest state. And when we do our cup experiment, we fill it until our cup overflows. And we just have
making messes.
Yep. Well, exactly.
These OT people and their messes.
Exactly.
Anyway.
And so in our red zone, we have so much energy that it's overflowing. It's exploding. Oftentimes the way that I talk about it with our kids is blue zone is low energy, green is medium energy, yellow is high energy, and red is exploding energy. And we talk about like volcanoes.
Yeah.
How it's exploding out the top. And the idea is our emotions have gotten so big that we have lost control, that we have lost control of our bodies because our emotions are so big.
Yeah.
And so those are going to be things like angry, mad, furious, terrified, maybe I'm elated, I'm ecstatic, something like an example I give a lot to people is one time, if
I've heard this story like 20,000 times.
yeah, but they haven't. People on
Anyway,
the pod haven't.
continue.
Okay? But it's something I feel like people can relate to, maybe.
Okay, I'll sit back and let you tell your story.
I'm sticking my tongue up. I am a big fan of Reba.
Yeah.
Reba McEntire, the country
Mhm.
singer. Love
You
her.
don't have to like give a last name. It's
Well,
just Reba.
Maybe everybody isn't super a fan as I am. But I'm a big fan of Reba. And one year, my family
Mm-hmm.
surprised me with tickets to go see Reba in concert, which was crazy because, like, it was completely unexpected.
Right.
We do not give each other gifts that expensive. Like, we just ain't got the money to do that
Yeah.
as our family. But my family managed to do it for me one year. And so I was completely shocked. And I was out of control with like how excited I was about it. I was elated, ecstatic, jumping up and down, screaming, like how crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be in that red zone. Like I was definitely not in my green or yellow zone. I was in my red zone. I was overjoyed.
Yeah.
And then another one that falls into that red zone category is devastation. Devastated when something, it's kind of, we're so sad that we have completely pushed past.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I like to describe red zone, because it can be a little confusing for some people, I think, is basically there is no emotion that starts in red. Like red is the extreme version of other emotions that exist other places.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, if scared is in yellow, if scared is, oh, I'm walking through and my friend jumps out and scares me, like, and hides behind a wall and scares me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in yellow zone because I'm scared. I was like,
Right.
oh, but I'm not completely, I didn't lose complete control over myself. Terrified might be if an intruder breaks into your home.
Yeah. For example, not intruder, but I was unloading my sleeping kids from their car this week, and I did not know that my husband was behind our house. And I just heard someone walking up on the leaves behind me. I was like pure, not just scared, but like pure, let's sprint to the door and get these kids to the door
Sure.
mode. So like went straight from yellow to red real fast.
Yeah.
Because I thought there was someone there.
Absolutely.
Because you cannot control once that happens.
Sure. And so, good example of scared versus terrifying.
Yeah.
And then frustrated versus angry. Frustrated, somebody like bumps into you while you're playing on the playground. Angry, somebody pushes you down. Similar thing with excited and then ecstatic.
Yeah.
Similar thing with sad, even, and devastated.
Yeah.
I'm sad when I break my toy. I'm devastated when my dog dies.
Yeah.
It's it's going into that extreme.
I know we're going to talk more about like what things are not, but so like that's a good example of you can go from an emotion can go from blue to red. Like emotions don't have to go blue to green to yellow to red. Like just because we talked about them in the step fashion,
Yes,
that's not how it technically is.
Right. Exactly. And one thing that's true too is you can have multiple things happening at once. You can have multiple emotions happening at once. I can be stressed in life, chronically stressed, but then also have periods of happiness or excitement or, or sadness. Like I can have two things happening at once. I can be really sad about this situation, but then also angry about this other piece of the situation. So multiple things can be happening at once. So it's really complicated, but we're just kind of talking the very basics.
Yeah. I will be honest, when I first learned about this, like through you, of course, at work, the colors like definitely triggered my brain to thinking back to like that, the thing in like the classrooms when we were kids. I'm sure we all had it.
Your color
the clothespins on like it was like a traffic light.
Yeah.
Green, yellow, red.
Yeah.
Traffic light with the clothespins on it. Straight back to that.
Sure.
When I first saw the colors, because like I was that kid who like I always tried to be very good, like felt like that was a priority, but also like end of the day very anxious about like I gotta keep it on green,
Sure.
every day.
Yeah.
Like if I ever got moved, like you might as well like just send me home for the day. Like uncontrollable.
And it's interesting that you bring that up, because one thing that the zones is not, one thing that it is not trying to do, it's not a behavior management program. It's not one of these systems. It's not a reward system. It's not a like move your clip system. It's not this. It's not a tool to be used to manage the behaviors in the classroom as a punishment or reward, or in that kind of a fashion.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Say those methods have been proven to become traumatic to some.
Yeah.
Cause anxiety with kids early on and things like that. So at first I was a little bit like, okay, I don't know about this. But after like seeing how it can be done correctly and learning more about it, I do like how like not one color is better than the other. So I'll let you kind of discuss that for us too.
Yeah, that's another thing that the zones is not. It's not a judgmental system. There is no emphasis on one zone being better than another. There is no emotion that's better than a different emotion.
Right.
We all experience them all because we are human. And it is normal and expected for us to experience all of the emotions. And so it's non-judgmental in the way that it goes about describing emotions. At no point in time is it better for you to be happy than it is for you to be sad or frustrated or angry, because there are situations when it is totally appropriate for you to be frustrated, or totally appropriate for you to be embarrassed or annoyed or angry. Like there are times when that is completely expected. For instance, and this is something that like adults struggle with sometimes. If I walk up to a kid and I tell this kid, if I'm in a hurry, I've got to go somewhere, and I go get this 3-year-old child and be like, okay, little Timmy, like it's time for us to go. We gotta bounce. And he was in the middle of playing with whatever it was that he was playing with. And he didn't have any sort of warning. He didn't have any sort of choice in the matter. He has no idea what we're doing, no kind of understanding of what the situation is even happening. It is naive of me to expect him to be anything other than frustrated, upset, confused, aggravated. Because that is a completely expected response.
Right.
For this 3-year-old to be everything that they were doing to be completely thrown off. That is an expected response. It is expected for me that if somebody walks up and slaps me in the face, I'm going to be angry. That is an expected response. If you're at school and one kid and 2 kids are playing and one kid snatches the toy from another kid, it is totally expected for that other kid who had their toy snatched to be upset about that, because this other kid just stole their toy. That's an expected response. So it's non-judgmental. The zones is a very non-judgmental method, talking about how all emotions are normal. They're all expected in different situations. And really it gives kids a system to understand how they're feeling, categorize it, because categorizing it often leads into our ability to communicate those emotions and those feelings. And then it at the end works with tools and strategies to help kids be more in control over their responses to their emotions.
Yeah. So
again, to reiterate, the zones is not a behavior management system, and it is not judgmental in the way that it describes emotions. It does not describe emotions or one zone being better than the others. They are all equal.
Yeah. I will remember one other misconception, and this is like a personal misconception I had in between the first time I learned about it and then follow-up conversations, was that we are trying to get the kids to green to be ready to learn. Like I remember from like the first time you talked about it, which was a rushed experience. It was like during our lunch.
Yeah.
I remember that I was like, oh yeah, all the colors are the same. But like I still had it in my head of like, but we're trying to get to green as for therapy sessions. Like I need to help kiddo get to green to participate, which I've learned was not the correct way of following the zones.
Sure.
So kind of how would you help with that misconception?
Well, because that is still making a judgment
Right.
that green is the best.
Right.
And green is where you should be.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one way that I describe emotions to families
Mm-hmm.
and to the kids is I imagine emotions often as like an environmental experience. So for instance, I don't have control over it raining.
Right.
I don't have control over the temperature. I don't have control over the time of day. I don't really have control over what my emotions do.
Right.
I really don't. I don't choose to get frustrated
Mm-hmm.
when somebody takes my sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
I just get frustrated.
Yeah.
I don't choose to be sad when somebody calls me a mean name. I just get sad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't choose to be embarrassed when I fall down in front of a bunch of people and I rip my pants.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not actively choosing to feel these things.
Right.
They are happening whether I like it or not. And I'll
Mhm.
tell you, oftentimes I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me angry when something happens. I'm like, ugh, I feel this way and I don't like feeling that way.
Yeah.
And so I get frustrated, which is normal.
Right.
That's a normal thing because I don't really have control over the emotions
Mhm.
themselves. What I do have control over is my response to the emotions. So similarly, kids are not necessarily going to be able to control
Mhm.
whether or not they're angry or frustrated or tired or sick or happy
Mhm.
in the situation. It just happens
Right.
and they are responding to it. It's oftentimes it's raw, unfiltered, like expression of what they are feeling.
Right.
And it's unfair to expect that people can control their emotions in their entirety. We could talk more about there are methods in which we can train ourselves to shift our perspective and to
Right.
be a little bit more tolerant of situations so that we aren't as easily triggered.
Mhm.
That is very much a thing. That
Right.
is very real. Cognitive behavioral therapy is very real
Mhm.
and very effective.
Yes. Outside of our scope, but outside of
We
our
can
scope.
use CBT techniques.
Well, yes. I just meant like the actual counseling therapy part
Right,
would
right,
probably
right.
need to be
Not-
brought in for these emotions
Yeah,
and stuff.
not a counselor, but there is something to be said about that.
Yeah.
Right. But that's not exactly what we're talking about here.
Right.
What we're talking about specifically is, and I don't know if that's super, and I just don't know. And so this would be really great if some counselor or psychotherapist who is trained in CBT for them to chime in.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's always super appropriate for kids because their brain is still developing.
Right.
And they don't have these rational centers of their brain as completely as an adult would.
Mhm.
But so there is something to be said about kind of shaping your framework, like shaping your mentality and kind of how tolerant we are of things so that we aren't as easily triggered. But generally, we don't really have control of our emotions.
Mhm.
And so it's unfair and it is unrealistic to expect that we are always going to be that we're always going to stay in green zone.
Mhm.
It's not fair
Right.
because I don't really get to choose if my emotions expand out of that.
Yeah.
It happens to me. And what happens is if you do place an expectation that green is best, it makes any time that you leave that green zone, it makes you feel shame. It
Mhm.
makes it a shameful experience
Yeah.
because I'm not good enough to stay in green. I'm broken. I'm bad.
Mhm.
I am. I'm an angry person. I'm a
Mhm.
sad person. I'm not capable of staying in this green zone. It's, it shuts the door to this idea of your own self-worth
Mhm.
because you can't control when you leave the zone.
Mhm.
What you do have control over is how you respond to it.
Right.
And that's what the zones is all about.
Right.
Is giving you tools to maintain control, maintain regulation
Mhm.
within the zone that you find yourself.
Yeah.
Because we will move through them throughout the day. And we just need to have the strategies to be able to find a level of control within whatever state that we find ourselves. Does that mean that you are just as capable as learning in the yellow zone as you are the green zone? No, absolutely not. The green zone is going to be the best state of arousal for learning to take place. That is just kind of physiologically the place where your brain is able to absorb the most information, integrate it, and use it.
Right.
But that does not mean that it is incorrect for a kid to find themselves in yellow or red or blue during a day in life or during a day at school or whatever it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Especially thinking about it, I don't know, it's a little bit easier, I think, for people to understand of like when you're sleepy or you're sick, like you can't control that.
Yeah.
Because those are a little bit more like tangible things to think about. And so like you wouldn't expect for a kid to come into a therapy session sleepy and like we're just going to magically get them to the green zone because they're going to be able to learn better.
Yeah.
And at the same time, just because they come in sleepy, we're not going to be, oh, you can't have therapy today because you're not in green zone.
Right.
So
there are still things that we can do to like help you be successful.
Right. We can use tools, but they're probably going to stay sleepy.
Yeah.
Even with the tools.
Yeah. They may be.
We can't give them, some espresso or anything like that.
Right.
And like this is the same for adults. Like we go to work in those zones as well. I doubt many of us go to work every morning in the green zone.
I'm in my blue zone most mornings. I'm not a morning person.
No, me either.
It is not my optimal. You hit me at 2:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah,
hit me at 2 p.m.
Hit me at like 11 p.m. I'm like on my computer doing my best work. Like,
okay, I'm not that extreme. But yeah, definitely not a morning person.
So like overall, we've talked a lot about it, but the main purpose is for one of the main purposes, at least, is to be able to identify emotions and to like communicate about emotions.
Yes, and so let me walk through kind of quickly how, because there's a whole framework to kind of move through the curriculum.
Okay.
Right. Initially, the zones works to help kids understand how they are feeling. What are emotions and how are you feeling? And the way that it does this is by talking heavily and doing activities heavily revolved around understanding, like, what even are emotions? Like, what's going on? What are they? What do they look like? And so there's a lot of activities that you can do to, when you're talking about emotions, describing what you're feeling, looking at faces. One of my favorite things to do, and it's so fun, and kids almost always have such a fun time with it. We get their favorite book, we get their favorite TV show, we get their favorite comic book characters or whatever it is, and we find pictures of them in different zones. We find different pictures of them in different, with different emotions. So it could be Superman, and he could be, Superman might be crying in this picture, so he's in his blue zone.
Superman doesn't cry.
He could.
I'm just kidding.
Hello.
Completely kidding.
Lois could be in trouble. I don't know.
Completely kidding.
Something could happen. His planet blew up. He's got to be sad about some things. Like, find him in his blue zone. And then have a picture of him smiling, and then a picture of him being a little like confused looking, and then a picture of him being angry.
Okay.
And categorizing those.
Yeah.
In the different zones. Or one thing that's really fun, especially since Inside Out 2 just came out, which I still haven't seen.
Me either.
Really need to.
So sad.
What are you doing this afternoon? Just kidding. But, well, I say just kidding, but I would go, but somebody's got plans. Lame.
Anyway.
But like Inside Out, it's really fun because we can talk about the characters in that, and they are emotions, and we can talk about their colors don't necessarily align with the colors of the zones, but we can talk about how they're acting, the things that we see, their facial expressions, the way that their body looks. What is it that they're doing that clues us that they are feeling excited, happy, angry, sad, whatever.
Right.
And And so talk about that. You start there. You talk about what even are emotions and are you able to recognize them? Once you are able to recognize them, then we talk about our own selves. What do I look like when I'm in my red zone? I'm in my yellow zone. I'm in my green zone.
Yeah. So you like personalize it a little bit.
Yes. You make it about you.
Okay.
Because this is one thing that's kind of neat, right? These are social emotional skills. And social emotional skills, as you know, because this is very much in the world of Speechy.
Yeah.
These are skills that are developed through interaction with other people.
Right.
Understanding how you're feeling is closely associated with seeing other people and how they're feeling and relating to it.
Right.
And so we start by looking at other people, recognizing how they're doing and what they've got going on, and then we turn it into ourselves.
Yeah, it's the same way that any little kid has learned how to do social emotional regulation skills. Like they have watched other people in their environment, so then they start doing the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so it starts there. And then once we understand how we feel and what we look like when we're feeling, then we start to investigate, why do you feel this way? What is it that's happening that is causing these changes in your emotions?
Asking all those WH questions.
It is so important, right? We're talking about these triggers. It's so, okay, I'm sorry, I'm being distracted. Ajax is just living his best life, being like super curious cat. And now I'm understanding why I see little like pieces of dirt all over everything, because he is fully climbed up on my bedside table right now, just like chilling. He's the cutest little cat ever. Oh, I love him.
Okay, we're back to where we're investigating, asking questions.
We're investigating these triggers.
Right.
And we're thinking about how are we feeling in these different situations? If this happened, how would you feel? If that happened, how would you feel? When was a time that you felt this thing? When was a time that you felt happy? When was a time that you felt excited? When was a time that you felt angry? Tell me what happened this week.
Yeah.
And then as we're talking about what happened this week, maybe their sibling did something. Maybe they went to a book fair. Maybe they, didn't get to go to the field trip. And we talk about these things and be like, okay, well, like, how did it make you feel? Like, what did you feel? And if they aren't able to tell you how they feel, then you step it back. What did your body look like? How did you respond? What did you do when you weren't able to go on that field trip? And then by investigating what they did, how they responded, then we can infer how they felt. And so when we've kind of talked about these triggers, then we can start recognizing, okay, now I need a tool. I need a strategy, something to help me when this trigger happens. I may need something to help me stay in control over my body, my actions, and my words. Yeah. And that's where those tools come in. So there's a lot of groundwork to build before we really dive deep into tools. You can definitely introduce strategies and these regulatory tools earlier. You can definitely do that, but it is not as effective if you start them from the beginning and you only give people tools if they don't even have a clue how they're feeling or why they need them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm really glad you explained the whole process, because like from a speech perspective, like that's one of my favorite things about the zones of regulation is like it is all about understanding, communication, language, like it is all incorporated there.
Absolutely.
So I really love that, the person who put this together was like, I'm going to develop something that helps kids communicate their zones, like, or their emotions, because, and I'm going to point out, is like emotions are hard to explain. Even adults have a hard time explaining emotions. It's an abstract concept. You can't really see it. Like, yes, we can talk about what it might look like, but I can't
we can see our response to it.
Right.
Don't see the emotion itself.
We can't see sad.
Yes.
Can't see it. We can see all the other things. It's like saying you can't see wind. We can't draw a picture of wind. Yeah. We can draw a picture of all the things that happen.
Have you seen Avatar: The Last Airbender? They did a great job.
Anyway, I should have known if I said wind, you were going to do that.
Listen, all I know is that my voice box is an airbender, so.
Oh, gosh. Okay, anyway, back from that. And we know that like abstract, language and wording, vocabulary, that's a lot harder to understand other than like concrete vocabulary, which concrete being things you can physically touch, see, things like that. So I think it's really important that they incorporated that and it makes it more accessible. So that's one comment I had from like speech perspective.
Yeah.
Also thinking of like it just, like I said, accessible as in like AAC users can even use this.
Sure.
Neurodivergent friends can use it.
Sure.
A little bit easier compared to talking about things because neurodivergent friends tend to have harder time with abstract thoughts even more than I always want to say atypical friends, but more than like neurotypical.
Yes. And
friends.
Let's explore that a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. Because you mentioned neurodivergent friends often struggle in these social, emotional, abstract thinking areas more than your typically developing kiddos.
Right.
And let's break it down.
Yeah.
Because this makes sense when we think about it. It is not unexpected that kiddos who with us, we tend to see a lot of kiddos with autism and ADHD. And it is not unexpected that they would be friends who have a lot bigger challenges in the areas of emotional regulation and control. Because like we said earlier, these are social emotional skills. And part of the neurodivergent experience, from my understanding and my experience working with this population, is often the area that is very hard. It is this social awareness, this social interaction. For instance, I have numerous examples, but I'll give you one. And this is a friend that we've talked about a lot on this podcast because he has taught me so much. He's one of those cornerstone kids for me that like I will look back on him for the rest of my career and be like, this kid was pivotal to my learning.
Right.
And my understanding. This friend has, from the day that I met him, lived in his own world. He was 3, maybe, when I started working with him. And typically developing 3-year-olds are very active socially. They are running around. They're seeking out opportunities to play with other people. They're very curious about what other people have going on.
Right.
My friend, who was on the spectrum, was not. At 3, he was still very much wrapped up in what he had going on. He was very solitary in everything that he did. And anytime that you interjected, whether that was, even if it was something you were trying to help, like if you were trying to help him put on a shoe or you were trying to put his clothes on, it felt like it seemed to feel like an excursion, like an excursion into his world, an invasion of his space.
Yeah.
And he would respond in such a manner.
Yeah, he was like in that heightened arousal mode.
Yeah.
Upon like contact.
Yes. You like reached in and like touched something. If he like spilled his drink and you reached in to like pick his drink back up, he would react very strongly. And what I learned through him was he doesn't recognize me as a human person in his space at all. He does not recognize me. He could go through his whole day never acknowledging that I exist, period. And so what that then tells me is he doesn't have the general awareness of me, of other people, to develop these social, emotional, regulatory skills. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have that awareness of other people. And so he's not observing what other people are doing. And he's not like thinking about that information, processing it, and then practicing.
Right.
You know, different kind of like social emotional strategies, these kinds of thinking and feeling processes.
Right.
Just because he doesn't have awareness of the world.
Right.
That's not his fault. You know, it just is the situation. And so it is, and that's not an uncommon experience. His may have been a little bit more stark and like clear, which is why it was, to me at least, it was much more clear that this is what was happening. But to varying degrees, this happens a lot with our other neurodivergent friends too.
And it's not to say like he one day cannot participate in this.
Absolutely.
But that's a good example of how like, you can tell that his social emotional skills are going to be delayed.
Right.
Because he's 3 and he's not observing his surroundings. So he is going to be delayed.
Sure.
In social emotional skills.
And these are things that have traditionally been very hard for them.
Right. So when he gets older, you know, say 10, 11, 12, like starting like early adolescent stage, he may have struggles in these areas.
Yeah. And what's fun is this friend now, he was 3 then, and he's about to turn 5. I can't tell you when his birthday is, but I learned that it was very close to mine. And that makes me very excited. But he's about to turn 5. And in these 2 years, now his mom just told me this week that he has, nowadays he is going to get people and taking them to the fridge to get food.
Yeah.
He's like, when he gets hungry, he's going to find someone and take them to the kitchen to fix food.
Yeah.
Which is a huge difference from 2 years ago when we were fully like in our own isolated world with not recognizing other people in it, to now we are recognizing other people and being like, oh, you can like do something.
And he's communicating with those people.
Yeah. He's like, yes.
Yeah.
So it's really great.
Yeah.
And so the zones is really cool too, because like you said, it does have the communication piece is a very big part of it. And so the zones is really fun because it is so visual.
Yeah.
There are so many visuals of everything.
Yeah. So those who do struggle with the abstract language and things like that, for the most basic part, even if they can't get into the answering, the inferencing stuff and all of that later on in the road, they can at least identify emotions. Yeah. Even if it's with a color, a toy, whatever they're using. So I really like that aspect of like the communication side of it, especially for like the early language users.
For sure.
Thinking about like early language users though, is there like a youngest age that this is appropriate for?
The zones was developed for school age kids.
Okay.
Like it was developed to be used in a school system.
Okay.
Like that's what it was for.
Right.
But it is such a cool system that it is very user friendly.
Yeah.
To bring into a clinical setting, to bring into a home setting.
Yeah.
It's a very it's really so well done. Yeah. Like major props to Leah. Like
especially with like the layout, because it sounds like you could do like that first step with your like early language learners.
Absolutely.
And then as they grow, like, you know, preschool age, you could start doing the thing where you're matching pictures and you're identifying others' emotions, identifying your emotions, and like as you grow into like adolescence, you could start doing the inferencing questions.
Sure.
And things like
that. And talking about them along the way. I mean, there's nothing to be said that there's nothing saying that you can't start these later topics earlier. There's no reason that you can't, as long as you understand the process. And like for instance, oftentimes kids learn different emotions sooner than others.
Yeah.
So oftentimes kids will tell you that they're sad. They'll be able to tell you that they're happy, that they're sad, that they're angry first.
Yeah.
And so with those, if they have a really good handle over how they're feeling, then start talking about these other things sooner.
Yeah.
And then as they get a little bit older and their emotions diversify and they start to recognize their emotions as more varied and unique rather than any time that I'm feeling a little bit of stress or aggravation, I'm angry, maybe there's some diversity in there, and maybe I'm actually recognizing, oh, I'm stressed or I'm anxious or I'm frustrated or I'm worried. Then you can incorporate those other things in.
Yeah. So like with kiddos who can identify a few emotions, it might be a good idea to go ahead and start, you know, reinforcing like, yeah, that is how you're feeling, or here's maybe something we can help with, like go ahead and start introducing some tools. Would that be acceptable?
Sure.
Even if it's just their few ones that they can identify?
Absolutely. And oftentimes the way that it starts with the like co-regulatory tools, because kiddos, as they are very small, children are not able to regulate themselves.
Right.
It is impossible. It is impossible for a child to regulate themselves in their earliest days.
Yeah.
And far beyond what a lot of people think that they should be able to regulate themselves. let's just think about it. Okay. Let's go through the progression.
Yep.
Infants, teeny tiny little infant babies, they are not able to self-soothe. They cannot soothe themselves. When they need something, when they're uncomfortable, when they're hungry, when they have a poopy diaper, whatever it is, they have these physical responses. And they use these physical strategies. They kick, they cry, they scream, they squirm to communicate, I am unwell and I need something to happen.
Yeah.
And they rely on another person to come in and meet the need that they are experiencing.
Right.
Whether that's giving them a bottle, changing their diaper, fixing their position, whatever it is. And then as kids get older and they begin to have language and they begin to have communication skills, even if it's not language,
right,
even if it's not verbal language, they start to communicate. And then those strategies turn into these communication strategies where I'm letting you know, hey, I need a drink. I want to play toys. I don't want to go.
They start speaking up for themselves.
Exactly. And they start using these communication strategies to receive help. But often, most of the time, they still rely on someone else to intervene to meet their need.
Right.
Because they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old.
Yeah.
They're still very young.
They're starting to use their words to attempt to control their environment.
Yes.
But obviously they cannot control the things in their environment yet.
Yes. And so they still need someone else to intervene. And so they're still relying on this co-regulation. Co-regulation just meaning that, in the broadest sense, just meaning that two people are involved in achieving this regulated state.
Right.
This controlled state. And then as kids get even older, then we start moving into what are called metacognitive strategies. Metacognition is a really fancy word, which we can talk about later at a different time too. But basically, it's just thinking about thinking.
Yeah.
It's your ability to be self-aware and thinking about you as a thinking, rational thing.
Right.
And so that's when we really get into those stages kind of in adolescence, when you're able to think about the situation, consider what happened in this situation, think about how to change it next time. What can I do differently in the future? Yeah. How did my response cause something to be different in the situation? How did my reaction cause the situation to get better or worse? And really kind of contemplate all of these,
analyze everything that's happened.
Right. And it's at that point that people get really good at regulating independently. But that's not until you're much older.
Yeah.
Like much older.
So really you can bring in some of these concepts.
Yes.
At any of those stages.
Absolutely. And you really...
Not really with an infant, but...
Well, kind of.
Kind of.
Because the same strategies that work for kids, but that work for infants, fun fact, are also very calming a lot of time for older kids.
True.
Oftentimes kids like to be held, even older kids. One of the first things that I do often when my kids are, think about when you're out on the playground and you're just out there at the park and you're on the playground and a kid falls down. What does their parent do?
Picks them up.
Run over there to them. They scoop them up. Yeah. And they comfort them,
I think the good point there is you're meeting basic needs first. And so with our infants, it's are you hungry? Are you sleepy? Are you wet? Do you need to be held? And so that's kind of what's happening in those instances.
Exactly.
Let's rush in, meet basic needs first. Make sure they're fed, make sure, all of the things.
Yes. And those same strategies are effective for even older kids.
Yeah.
Sometimes even adolescents want to be held. Even sometimes they need to be cradled and they need to be, maybe they just want a pat on the back or they just need you to rub their arm or something.
Even me as an adult, sometimes I just need some food and I'll be less hungry.
Sure. Absolutely. And so those strategies, we want to use those strategies, right? But then there's other things. Right. Breathing strategies are always helpful. I know people get sick and tired of hearing about them. I know that they do, because it's like everybody tells you just breathe, but it's breathing with a technique that is helpful. And there's a bunch of different kinds of breathing strategies. Those can be done really, really early. And actually, I saw this really cool. I read this really cool article one time about. It was a video. It was just a little animated video that these researchers played for children. I don't remember how old they were. But it was a video that they played for the children, and it was a controlled trial, a controlled experiment. So there was an experimental group whose video had, it was an animated video that had breathing strategies embedded in the video. It was very short. It was like a 2 or 3 minute video.
Yeah.
And then did I say that was the experimental group? That was the experimental group.
Yes.
And the control group, they had a video, same animation style, but had none of the breathing strategies in it. And they were hooked up to ECGs and like breathing monitors. And so they were monitoring these markers, these physiologic markers. So their heart rate, their respiration rate, the depth of their breath. And what they found was, even just watching the video that had the breathing strategies encouraged them to follow along. But even the kids that were not actively participating in the breathing strategy, even the ones that were just watching, tended to have a slower, like their heart rate would slow down, their breathing would slow down, even if they weren't actively involved.
Yeah.
More so when compared to the control group, who didn't have any of that going on.
Which is why that helps in like co-regulation too. So like if a parent sits in front of a kid and does breathing techniques, a kid can still calm down just from the parent doing that.
Yes.
And a lot of that we've kind of talked about before in the play episode. I think I mentioned like the mirror neurons in that episode, and we should probably talk about that in neuroanatomy one day. But that's kind of where that kind of plays into, of like they're seeing it happen to somebody else, so their brain is like triggering of like, okay, you can do that too. So they reap the benefits from that, as an example.
Absolutely. And so these regulatory strategies come in, or like, you can bring them in early.
Right.
And you can start off simple. And as you get more complicated and more complex, and as kids develop and mature, we become more complicated and complex as humans who grow. And so our strategies will become more complex, more complicated.
Emotional regulation is so hard, though. It's like, we're talking about it. It sounds so simple when we're like, yeah, just do this.
Yeah.
But like, as a parent, it can be really hard, because like you have to have your emotions in check in order to help your child.
Yes.
Which is extremely difficult. Because like life is hard anyway.
Life is hard.
And so like when you have a screaming 2-year-old and you just got hit by a toy, it's really hard for parents to be like, okay, let me keep my emotions in check. Because being hit by a toy is going to make you want to go to red zone, or probably puts you in red zone, and then makes you want to act on red zone.
Yep.
Because you obviously can still send you to red zone.
And so I want to shout out to parents.
Yeah.
Okay. I am not a parent. And so I cannot relate to the experience of being responsible for a 2-year-old for 24 hours a day.
You can borrow mine if you want to.
That's okay. I love children, but I'm very happy to not have them in my home with me all the time. I love children, obviously. But what I do want to give parents is the permission to take time for yourself.
Right.
You are allowed. I had a mom tell me one time, their kiddo, we worked on a lot of emotional regulation things with this kid. And mom was like, I just don't even know what to do, because you explained what she was talking to me about. He gets this way, he gets fired up, and he starts having a meltdown, and then I immediately get upset, and I like don't know what to do. And so I told her, I was like, okay, if this is what's happening, you're not in a state where you can help him. when you get fired up also.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's what's happening, then take a minute
Yeah.
for yourself. Don't intervene immediately.
Mm-hmm.
You are, as long as he is safe,
Mm-hmm.
as long as he is not in a space that he's going to like seriously injure himself or seriously injure someone else, then take a minute to step outside of the room where you can still supervise and be, available if you need to, if things do get dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Or if there's another adult there, fully like let them know, I need to step out for 2 minutes. Can you watch him for a minute and I will be back?
Yeah.
You are allowed to take time for yourself so that you can come back in with the control that you need to help this kiddo in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's also unrealistic for you as a parent to expect that you're going to be completely in control all the time,
Mm-hmm.
that you're going to have all the right answers all the time. It's not real. That's not real life.
Right.
It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And parents, give yourselves permission to be human too.
Yeah.
Because as superhuman as parents are, and really they blow my mind because I just am so amazed by parents,
Mm-hmm.
you are also a person who has your own emotions and your own stuff that you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And like we said, you don't really get to control your emotions.
Right.
They happen to you and you have to figure out what to do with it. So you are allowed to take a moment to yourself, to collect
Mm-hmm.
yourself and do what you got to do,
Right.
you know?
Because even in the example when I was giving, I said, because then you let yourself get into red zone. Like, that's not how it works.
Nope.
It's a normal
It
reaction.
happens, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And I'm sure parents don't like it.
No.
I'm sure it's incredibly frustrating when your kid has, your kid shatters your heirloom glass, whatever. I don't know.
I mean, not even that. Like, I'm just like yesterday, I'm literally sitting on the couch and I got smacked with a toy in the face.
Yep.
Like,
Sure, right?
it
Like,
doesn't feel great.
it's not great. And then you feel like a terrible person because you're like, well,
Right.
now I'm really mad at my kid.
Yeah.
And like, that doesn't feel great
Mhm.
as the parent,
Mhm.
but it's normal.
Right.
Like, that is normal to get angry when someone punches you in the face.
Yeah. It's a good reminder, too, that as therapists, y'all should be taking the time to go over zones of regulation with parents as well.
It is not okay.
For the parents' sake, not just to educate about the kids. Obviously,
Mhm.
if you're not doing that, that's a whole nother
Mhm.
lesson. But
Mhm.
so that the parents can implement it within themselves too. Because if
Sure.
they have a kiddo who is needing intervention, extra help with the zones of regulation due to whatever behaviors or challenging instances, I guarantee the parent's going to need some extra support
100%.
as well. Because they're going to have more situations than most that are going to put them in the red zone.
Sure.
So it's
Absolutely.
got to be there to offer that support.
And the zones is a really great system that works through modeling,
Mm-hmm.
right? So as the adult in the situation, it can be very effective to model all the different things that are happening. And so
Yeah.
those are moments that you can teach your kids. I am very upset right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm going to do about it.
Yeah. It's a great point.
And then I also want to say this too, because this is another misconception about
Mhm.
just emotions and regulation in general. Like I mentioned earlier, there is perfectly acceptable for you to feel all of your emotions.
Mhm.
And there are times that you don't need tools.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's shocking to some people to hear, but there are times that it is totally appropriate to feel every single thing that you're feeling
Mm-hmm.
and to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just let it out, for instance. And then there are times that it's not. There are times that it's
Right.
not appropriate. Let me give an example. The one that I like to give. And I give extreme examples because this is real life, right? This
Mhm.
happens to people. Imagine I'm going to give a really extreme example.
Mhm.
You're with a loved one at home. They pass away
Mm-hmm.
at home. This has happened in my life. So this is why this makes sense to me. You have a loved one, they pass away in your home. It is 100% appropriate and okay for you to completely break down
Mm-hmm.
and just bawl your eyes out.
Mm-hmm.
That is totally okay.
Mm-hmm.
Totally appropriate. You're in a safe space.
Mm-hmm.
you are that's totally fake, like totally fine. It is less appropriate if you are driving down the highway going 75 miles an hour on the interstate
Mm-hmm.
and you get a phone call, someone was just in a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
It is not safe for you to then immediately have a breakdown as you're going 75 miles an hour down the highway. You need to be able to stay in control long enough to get to a safe place,
Mm-hmm.
to pull over on the side of the road, and then have your moment where you break down.
Right.
What we are not trying to do is we are not trying to suppress our feelings.
Mm-hmm.
We are not trying to suppress our ability to have feelings, feel them, let them out. That is very important.
Mm-hmm.
But in life, it is not always appropriate for us to let the floodgates open
Mm-hmm.
in every moment of the day.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does.
It is totally appropriate for your kid to get angry if little Johnny steals his toy.
Yeah.
It may not be appropriate for your kid to knock little Tommy out.
I'm going to say it's not appropriate on that one.
You know? But if he wants to go scream and he wants to go kick something,
Yeah.
then fine. Like, let's do that. I know this is really frustrating right now. If you don't feel like you can handle the situation in a way that you're not going to punch out Johnny or Tommy or whatever his name is, then let's go punch something else first and then we'll come back. You know?
Yeah.
Like, feel the feelings.
Mm-hmm.
You're allowed to feel the feelings. They happen. There's just times when it's expected, and there's just times when it's safer and times when it's not.
We just have to kind of be more in control of our reactions.
That's really all it's about.
Yeah.
Is just controlling your reactions.
One of the things that me and my husband try to like remind each other, in our household at least, where we have 202, is like never react.
Yeah.
Like not.
You're responding.
Yeah. We want to respond to the action, like to whatever's going on. We want to take the time to respond appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
Not just react or snap, as many people say.
Yeah.
And we talked about it for parents, but it's also important that therapists keep this in mind too.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a great idea for therapists to, you know, check in on themselves for
sure.
zones as well, where they're at, because things happen in therapy sessions that can send you into any zone.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's not an appropriate place to react
right
to your emotions.
Yeah. It's not, because you are, like we mentioned, you're responsible for these kids.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly for parents, right?
Right.
Like, you're allowed to be angry and frustrated that your kid is punching you in the face. They're smearing poop on the walls. Like,
gosh,
that's totally appropriate for you to feel upset and aggravated by that. It's may not be appropriate for you to like take that out on the kid.
Right. I love that you're saying may not.
I'm trying to be gracious.
It's not. Anyway.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you're allowed to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
And you are allowed to let it out.
Right.
But there's healthier ways to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We really got on a tangent there.
We did. And I think that I could totally go into a part 2 of like actually talking about some applications. I
think applications for part 2 would be great.
Yeah. Because we talked a lot about the idea of it and the concepts.
How to kind of implement it, but not strategies yet.
Yes. And so we can totally do a part 2 that's like actually talking about applications and like interventions and what to do, how to implement it, and how to incorporate it into your life as a parent.
Yeah.
Maybe incorporate it into your school day if you're a teacher.
Yeah.
And then incorporate it into your clinical practice.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
We can totally do that at another time. Because
we really went into depth with emotional regulation as a whole, though. But it's very speech, it's very OT, so this is like, I don't know, it meets really well.
I agree. And this is something that we need to have a deeper conversation about, just in general, is I feel this was developed by an OT.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a system that is owned by OT alone.
Right.
It was developed by an OT, which makes a lot of sense. But teachers can use it, parents can use it, speechies can use it, PTs can use it. Like, anybody that has feelings can use this curriculum.
Right.
And because it's so user friendly and it is everyone's responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
It is everyone's responsibility. It is everyone's responsibility to consider the regulation of a child.
Yeah.
Because that is how they're going to be the most successful, is if they are able to be in control when they need to be.
Maybe in part 2, I'll add a little bit more like speech applications as well. Because Jonathan presented the topic, of course, because you have learned so much about this and given talks on it.
Yeah.
But that does not mean that like I don't fully agree that this is it's very speech friendly. Like
very, very.
If I had a patient who is in this area, I would definitely use it. And I do use these skills on a day-to-day basis with my own kiddos. Yeah. So we'll talk more about it.
Yeah, we totally will. So with that, do you have a therapy win of the week?
Gosh.
I'll give a therapy win of the week related to this. Related to the zones.
Yeah, that's fine.
Kind of keep it on topic.
Yeah.
I have one of my friends that I have been working with recently. He's an older guy. Older meaning 12, 13. That kind of range. Maybe he's 14. I don't know. I've known him so long that I forget. It's terrible. But I've got an older teenage, like early teenage friend. And we've been working a lot with understanding our emotions, being familiar with our body clues or our body cues, as we talk about them, our body signals. Different curriculums call it different things, but basically just like what does our body do when we're feeling different emotions. And
is this your friend that scared me in the office that day, or is this another?
Probably. He does love to scare people.
Okay, cool.
He loves to scare people. It's I don't remember.
Okay,
I don't remember which friend that was.
It's fine.
Maybe.
Moving on.
He calls me Mr. Banana because he's hilarious.
Okay.
And we've been working with some kind of understanding our emotions because he has very big emotions that he doesn't know what to do with a lot of the time. Not a lot of the time anymore. Once upon a time, it was a lot. But these days, he has really made a lot of progress. And we've been practicing a lot with a kind of our emotional awareness and things. And we were doing an activity. There's an activity in the zones. It's called the Zones in Me activity, I think. Maybe it's me and not zones. It doesn't matter. But there's an activity where you draw a picture of yourself in the different zones.
I've seen some of the kids' versions of that.
His were amazing. They were so good. He drew pictures of himself in the blue zone. We did all 4 of the zones, and he used like colored like the little markers to make his little pictures. What was funny is he actually drew pictures of me. He drew pictures of me in my zones. But they were so good. It was like the angry guy. He had fists. He had a scowl on his face. His blue zone person was sad, and he was crying, and he was looking down. And his yellow zone friend, his yellow zone picture was him feeling silly. And he had like he had a wacky facial expression, and his tongue was sticking out. And I was like, it was so fun. I love that activity. It is one of my favorite activities. And my kids have impressed me by their artistic abilities so many times. And his was just great. It was good. Such a fun activity. Do you have a therapy win of the week?
No, I'm going to use a home win of the week. Because I got my own little emotional 2-year-old to hang out with every day.
A mom of the week.
A mom win of the week, I guess. So my daughter we're very much we're starting to identify our own emotions and like verbalize when they're happening. Her new favorite is to say, I'm mad. And it's almost funny. It's so cute that it's almost funny because it's like the stereotypical like big like puffed up like I'm mad. And I'm like, yes ma'am. I know you are. But she's been able to identify that more and more here lately in like the most appropriate ways. And so I think that's just really impressive, so I'm counting that as a win
for sure. And
then we've just been practicing a lot of like the sit down with her, breathe back and forth with her, and her little cute breaths are so good. I'm like, she's like, take breath, and I'm like, yes, take a breath, and she takes the cutest little deep breath. Not to say that this happens every time. This is like one indication where it's not a perfect life. I don't want to paint that picture whatsoever. But when it does happen, it is such a good win. But it was so funny. One day we were checking out at a store and she did the I'm mad because obviously there were things at the checkout that we could not purchase.
Sure.
Because stores hate parents.
Yeah.
And the person at the checkout.
That stores hate parents.
Okay, there was a Mirabelle doll on the other side of the like little see-through wall. And of course my daughter is like, she goes, no, means Bruno, which means Encanto, which means Mirabelle, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense.
She's like, I want no.
Oh.
And I was like, yes, I understand, but we're already past that wall. Like, there is no turning back.
You can't do it.
And that turned into the I'm mad. And I'm like, we understand. But of course, the cashier was like, oh wow, she's telling you she's mad. I'm like, yeah.
I love that.
Unfortunately, this is where we're at, and we're doing it in public for all to see. But it's still a win. It's still a win. Is. She's able to tell me her feelings, and we have grown a little bit more. Like she will say she's happy too, so that's fun. And she'll doesn't really do sad for herself, but she'll talk about her brother. Like when brother cries, she'll say, "Bubba's sad, Bubba's sad." So we're learning a lot. So it's expanding a lot. So it's a fun time and really applicable to today's conversation. So
yeah, for sure. I love that so much.
It's in real life.
That's so cute.
It is adorable.
Aw. Well, let us know what your therapy wins of the week are, or your mom wins, or dad wins, parent wins, grandparent wins, whatever.
Absolutely.
Whatever you are. Human wins.
If you identify your own emotions, it's totally fine.
If you recognize that you were feeling sad one day, let us know.
Yeah.
Like, I love that. You can contact us through our Instagram, the.co-treat, at the.co-treat.
It sounded like you said D dot.
No,
D dot.
Oh no, I was like, why'd you look at me so funny?
You said it so fast.
Sorry. No.
The dot.
It's at the.co-treat. Co-treat is one word, by the way.
Yeah.
It's on Instagram, it's not hyphenated.
Right.
On the podcast places, it's hyphenated, but on Instagram, it's not hyphenated. The.co-treat. Leave us a comment.
Yep.
Leave us a like, a subscribe. No, subscribe to YouTube. What is it? A follow? I don't know how to be
just follow us.
An influencer.
Leave us a review somewhere.
Are we influencers?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, yeah. Okay. But just let us know. Let us know. We want to hear what you have to say. If you agree with what we said, let us know. If you think that we are completely wrong and you have some corrections, please let me know.
Absolutely.
Like I said, I'm always open to learning new things. So let us know, and we will do a part 2 sometime. Eventually. I don't know when. But we'll let you know. Keep you updated.
Love it.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. See you guys later.
Bye, friends.